On a rainy morning, a homeless girl finds 3 abandoned babies in a luxurious basket. Unknowingly, she becomes the target of a dangerous network involving kidnapping, inheritance, and family betrayal. But with courage and love, she will face powerful forces to protect the only lives that trusted her. The rain lashed down on the streets of Oxford Street as Rachel, a 7-year-old girl, huddled under the awning of a luxurious building. Her small, thin body trembled beneath her faded dress, and her bare feet were bruised from walking the streets of London all day. In her calloused hands, she clutched a handful of wilting flowers she had tried to sell throughout the day. Rachel had arrived from rural County Cork 2 years ago, brought by an aunt who promised to care for her after her parents' death in an accident. But the promises dissolved like sugar in water, and in a short time the girl found herself alone on the streets of the largest British metropolis. "Sir, would you like to buy a little flower?" she would ask in a sweet voice to the hurried passers-by who walked protected by expensive umbrellas. Most didn't even look at her. To them, Rachel was invisible, just another child in the statistics of social inequality plaguing the country. The sky darkened completely when the rain finally stopped. Rachel put the remaining flowers in a plastic bag and decided to walk to Hyde Park, where she usually slept hidden among the dense trees. The park's security guard, old Benedict, pretended not to see her enter after closing hours. It was a silent agreement between the two. "Go to sleep early tonight, girl," Benedict said, opening a small gap in the side gate. "There's a local council patrol tonight." Rachel nodded and slipped into the park, knowing every inch of that place like the back of her hand. She walked silently among the centuries-old trees until she reached her usual hiding spot, a small clearing protected by dense bushes where she kept a piece of cardboard and an old blanket. That's when she heard it. A faint cry, almost imperceptible. Then another, a little louder. And then a third. Rachel froze, her senses sharpened by years of living on the streets. Slowly, she followed the sound to a more secluded cluster of trees. Hidden behind a wide trunk, there was a basket. Not just any basket, but something that looked like it came from a luxury baby store. It was lined with white satin fabric and had a navy blue bow on the handle. Rachel approached cautiously. The crying came from within. With trembling hands, she delicately pulled back the fabric covering the basket's contents and gasped. 3 identical babies, perhaps only a few months old, dressed in blue rompers of some expensive material Rachel had never touched before. They had dark hair and almond-shaped eyes that stared at her through tears. One of them extended a chubby little hand towards her. "My God," Rachel whispered, looking around. There was no one. Just her and 3 babies abandoned in the park on a cold night. Her first instinct was to call old Benedict, but something stopped her. What if it was some kind of trap? What if they blamed her? Or worse, what if they took the babies to some horrible shelter like the one where she had briefly stayed when she first arrived in London? Rachel remembered well the stories she had heard about the care system. Children separated, mistreated, forgotten. Her heart ached at the thought of the 3 little babies going through that. "I won't let that happen to you," she murmured. Determined. Carefully, she picked up the heavy basket and, checking that no one was around, left the park through the secret passage only she knew, a gap in the fence near Bond Street. The abandoned warehouse where Rachel had recently found shelter was a 15-minute walk away. It was an old department store depot that had gone out of business. The girl had discovered a back entrance where a broken window allowed her to slip inside. The place was full of empty boxes and broken mannequins, but it was dry and relatively safe. With great effort, Rachel managed to get the babies there. They were crying louder now, probably hungry. The girl placed the basket in the cleanest corner she could find and tried to calm them. "Shh, it's going to be okay," she whispered, stroking their soft little heads. "I'll take care of you." But how? She had no proper baby food, no nappies, no bottles. All she had were a few coins she'd earned selling flowers, barely enough for a loaf of bread. Sitting beside the basket, Rachel looked at the identical little faces and made a decision. She needed to differentiate them somehow. She took 3 colorful ribbons she used to tie flower bouquets, one red, one green, and one yellow, and delicately tied one around each baby's wrist. "You'll be Michael," she said to the baby with the red ribbon, remembering the name of a kind boy who had once shared his snack with her. "You'll be Raphael," she continued, speaking to the baby with the green ribbon. in honor of the patron saint of children her grandmother often mentioned. "And you'll be Gabriel," she finished with the baby with the yellow ribbon, completing the triad of angels. As she cradled the 3 babies, an unusual commotion began to happen 12 blocks away, in the penthouse of one of the most luxurious buildings on Park Lane. Lights were being switched on. People hurried in and out, and luxury cars arrived in sequence. Rachel had no idea, but the 3 little babies now sleeping in her arms were at the center of a plot involving one of the most powerful and influential families in the UK, a plot whose consequences she would begin to feel very soon. Night advanced, and exhaustion finally overcame Rachel, who fell asleep clutching the basket. Her dreams, for the first time in a long while, were not about running away or hunger. They were about a family, her and 3 boys running in a green field under a bright blue sky. The day dawned with a brightness that streamed through the cracks in the warehouse roof. Rachel woke with a start to the babies' cries. They were red and agitated, certainly hungry. "I need to get food for you," she murmured, worried. Looking around, she improvised a cot with cardboard boxes and the blanket she used. She carefully placed the babies in it and contemplated them, torn between the need to go out for help and the fear of leaving them alone. The little ones looked at her with absolute trust, as if they knew that this frail girl was their only hope. It was this look that gave Rachel the courage she needed to act. "I'll be back soon, I promise," she whispered, kissing each soft little forehead, before quickly leaving through the broken window. What she didn't know was that the 3 angels fate had placed in her path would change her life forever, and she would change theirs. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll continue. In the heights of the Hampstead neighborhood, in an imposing mansion protected by high walls and advanced security systems, Bernard Alistair Montgomery paced back and forth in his noble wood-paneled office. At 35, he was the president of the BAM Group, a conglomerate of companies ranging from civil construction to technology, an empire built by his father and exponentially expanded by his own hands. At that moment, however, none of that mattered. His face, usually composed for business magazine covers, was transfigured by anguish. Deep dark circles revealed he hadn't slept for over 48 hours, ever since his 3-month-old triplets had disappeared, along with the car they were in. "Any news?" He asked for the 10th time to his head of security, a stern-faced man named Silver, a former federal police officer who commanded a 15-person search team. Still nothing. "Mr. Montgomery, the security cameras in the area where the car was found were deactivated. It seems planned." Bernard ran his hands through his dark hair, disheveling it further. He turned to the window overlooking the mansion's immaculate gardens. Somewhere out there, his children were lost. Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel, the heirs to the BAM empire, had vanished without a trace. "Sir," Silver called, "the press is gathered at the gate. They want an official statement." "To hell with them," Bernard roared, turning with flashing eyes. "My children are missing and my wife is in a coma in the hospital. I'm not giving anyone satisfaction." Teresa, his wife, was admitted to the ICU of St. Thomas's Hospital after the accident. The driver taking her and the children had lost control of the car on the Thames embankment, and the vehicle had partially fallen into the river. Teresa was rescued unconscious, but when firefighters returned to retrieve the babies, they simply weren't there anymore. No one saw anything, no one knew anything. "Sir," Silver insisted, "we need to consider increasing the reward. £1 million might not be enough for someone who knows something to risk getting involved." Bernard agreed with a nod. "5 million, and I want flyers all over the city. Advertisements in all newspapers, television, radio, internet, billboards, whatever is possible. I want my children's faces on every square inch of this city." "Yes, sir," Silver replied, making quick notes on his tablet. The office door opened, and Augustus Alistair, Bernard's father and founder of the BAM Group, entered with his usual imposing stance. At 72, he was still an impressive figure, with perfectly combed grey hair and an impeccable suit. "Bernard, we need to talk," he said in his deep, authoritative voice. Silver discreetly withdrew, leaving father and son alone. Augustus walked to the bar in the corner of the office and poured himself a whiskey. "I'm concerned about the impact of all this on the business," he began, without preamble. "Shares have already fallen 4% today. Bernard stared at his father in disbelief. My children have disappeared. Teresa is between life and death, and you're worried about the stock price? Don't be naive, Augustus retorted coldly. The BAM Group employs over 20,000 people. Any instability affects all these families. It's our responsibility to maintain market confidence. My only responsibility now is to find my children, Bernard countered, approaching his father with a tense face. And to find out what really happened in that accident. Augustus raised an eyebrow. What are you implying? Nothing yet. But it's quite a coincidence that the car's security system failed precisely when it was passing through a stretch without surveillance cameras, don't you think? A heavy silence settled between the two. Augustus sipped his whiskey, his face an impenetrable mask. Be careful with your conspiracy theories, son. Focus on finding the children and leave the investigations to the police. At that moment, Bernard's phone rang. It was from the hospital. His heart pounded as he answered. Mr. Montgomery, this is Dr. Olivia. Your wife has shown improvement in her vital signs, but there's no prediction yet for her to awaken from the coma. I thought you'd want to know. Thank you, Doctor. I'll be there in an hour, Bernard replied, hanging up with a sigh. At least one piece of news wasn't entirely bad. Teresa? Augustus asked, finishing his drink. Yes, vital signs stable, but still in a coma. The patriarch nodded and walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned to his son. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment, Bernard. There are many interests at stake. Alone again, Bernard sat heavily in his chair. He felt there was something much bigger behind his children's disappearance. Something that might be closer than he imagined. Meanwhile, in Mrs. Zelda's small flat, in the Camden Town neighborhood, Rachel anxiously watched the three babies, who now slept peacefully in a makeshift bed with cushions. The 72-year-old woman, with her gentle face marked by time, prepared bottles in the small kitchen. They're fine, girl. They were just hungry, Mrs. Zelda reassured, handing Rachel a bottle. Where did you say you found them? Rachel bit her lip, unsure how much she should reveal. She had met Mrs. Zelda weeks ago, when the old woman saw her sleeping on a park bench and offered her a sandwich. Since then, the girl occasionally visited the small flat to take a bath and eat a warm meal. In the park, she answered vaguely, adjusting the red ribbon on Michael's wrist. I think someone abandoned them. Mrs. Zelda made the sign of the cross. Blessed Virgin Mary, what kind of person abandons three of God's creatures like this? They need to go to a shelter, Rachel. Or to the police. No, Rachel exclaimed with more force than she intended. She lowered her voice when she saw the babies stir. Please, Mrs. Zelda, I can't take them there. I promise I'll find a solution, but I need some time. I just need to stay with them here for a few days. The elderly woman studied the girl's pleading face. There was something in Rachel's gaze, a fierce determination mixed with fear that deeply moved her. All right, she sighed, giving in. They can stay, but only for a few days, understood? After that, we need to find these children's family or take them to the authorities. Rachel agreed, relieved. She needed this time to think about what to do. The next day, while Mrs. Zelda looked after the babies, Rachel went out to try and earn some money selling flowers. That's when she saw on a pole near the underground station a poster that made her blood run cold. It was a photo of the three babies smiling at the camera, with the words, Missing Children of Bernard Montgomery, reward of £5 million. Rachel froze. The babies hadn't been abandoned. They had been kidnapped. And now she was with them. No one would believe she had found them by chance. They would think she was an accomplice to the kidnappers, or worse, the kidnapper herself. With her heart pounding, Rachel tore the poster from the pole and ran back to Mrs. Zelda's flat. She needed to tell the old woman the truth and decide what to do. Perhaps they should contact the children's father directly. But as she turned the corner of the street where Mrs. Zelda lived, Rachel saw something that made her quickly hide behind a tree. A black luxury car was parked in front of the building, and two men in suits were talking to one of the neighbors, showing what appeared to be an official document. Instinctively, Rachel knew these men weren't there to help. There was something in their movements, in the way they looked around, that triggered all her internal alarms developed on the streets. Who were those men? Were they looking for the babies? And how had they gotten there? Suddenly, everything became much more complicated and dangerous. Rachel remained motionless behind the tree, watching the men in suits who continued to talk to Mrs. Zelda's neighbor. Her heart was beating so fast that she feared they could hear it from a distance. When the men finally entered the building, she waited a few minutes before cautiously approaching. The girl crept to the side window of Mrs. Zelda's ground-floor flat, which overlooked a small, unkempt garden. Standing on tiptoes, she managed to peek inside. What she saw made her entire body go cold. The two men were inside the flat. One of them held Mrs. Zelda's arm tightly, while the other ransacked the small living room. The old woman looked scared, but kept her lips firmly closed, shaking her head in denial. The babies were not in sight. "Where is the girl?" the taller man asked, bringing his face close to Mrs. Zelda's. "We know she was here with 3 babies. The neighbors saw her come in." "I don't know who you're talking about," the elderly woman replied with dignity, despite the evident fear in her eyes. The second man, shorter and stockier, emerged from the bedroom. "Nothing in there, Cardoso. But look what I found in the kitchen." He showed 3 empty baby bottles. Rachel recoiled from the window, panic growing. How did they find out? Who were they? They didn't look like police, despite wearing suits and showing some kind of document. And most importantly, where were Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel? The answer came seconds later, when she heard a faint cry coming from a small room at the back of the yard, used as a storage shed. Mrs. Zelda must have hidden the babies there when the men arrived. Crouching to avoid being seen, Rachel crawled to the small room and silently opened the door. The 3 babies were there, wrapped in blankets and hidden behind some old boxes. When they saw her, Gabriel smiled and extended his little arms towards her. "Shh," Rachel hushed, carefully picking them up. "We need to be very quiet now." The girl knew she had only a few minutes before the men checked the back room. She looked around desperately, searching for an exit. The wall separating the yard from the back street wasn't very high, but how could she climb it carrying 3 babies? That's when she saw the old shopping trolley Mrs. Zelda used to bring groceries. Rachel quickly placed the babies inside it, covering them with an old sheet she found hanging on the clothesline. With great effort, she managed to push the trolley to the wall and, using a wooden box as a step, climbed onto the wall. From the top, she stretched as far as she could and, one by one, pulled the babies into her arms, carefully descending down the other side. Raphael's cry almost gave away their escape, but Rachel quickly calmed him, cradling him against her chest. "Now we need to run," she whispered to the little ones, as if they could understand. "We're going to find a safe place." Rachel knew every alley and passage in central London. Living on the streets, she had mentally mapped out the best places to hide, to get food, to sleep undisturbed. This knowledge was now her greatest advantage. Carrying the 3 babies in an improvisation, with the sheet tied like a sling around her small body, she headed to Trafalgar Square. There, in the basement of an abandoned building that had once been a luxurious hotel in the 1950s, there was a space known only to a few homeless people, a relatively clean cellar, with access to old plumbing that still provided water. Arriving there, Rachel found 2 acquaintances, Ty, a man in his 50s who had lived on the street since losing everything in a fire, and Janine, a woman in her early 30s who was fleeing an abusive relationship. "Rachel, what is this?" Janine asked, agape at the sight of the 3 babies. "Please, I need help," Rachel pleaded, her eyes full of tears. "Dangerous people are after these babies. I can't explain everything now, but they're not good people." "And Mrs. Zelda? I think they might hurt her." Ty, who always had a huge heart despite his hard life, didn't ask questions. He simply said, "I'll go there and see how she is. You stay here with Janine." As Ty left, Janine helped Rachel settle the babies in a more protected corner of the cellar. She took off her own sweatshirt and made a kind of mattress for them. "They need nappies, milk, everything," Rachel said, desperate. "And I have no money." Janine looked thoughtfully at the babies. "I have a little saved. It's not much, but it should cover the basics. I'll go to the chemist while you stay with them." When she was alone with the triplets, Rachel allowed herself to cry silently. What had started as an act of kindness, saving 3 abandoned babies, now placed her in the middle of something much larger and more dangerous than she could imagine. Michael held her finger tightly, as if to comfort her. Raphael looked at her with curious eyes, while Gabriel had finally fallen asleep. These small gestures renewed Rachel's determination. No matter who was after them or why, she would protect them at all costs. Hours later, Ty returned with news that made Rachel's stomach churn. "Mrs. Zelda is well but shaken," he reported, sitting heavily on the concrete floor. "Those men questioned her for a long time. They said they were from social services, but she was suspicious. When they finally left, she told me everything." "What did she say?" Rachel asked, fearing the answer. "That these babies are the children of Bernard Montgomery, that rich businessman who appears in the newspapers. They've been missing since an accident with their mother. There are posters all over the city, £1 million reward. How did you get involved in this, girl?" Rachel explained how she had found the babies abandoned in the park, how she believed she was saving them, and how she only discovered the truth when she saw the poster. "But something's wrong, Ty. If these men were really looking for the babies to return them to their father, why didn't they call the police when they suspected they were at Mrs. Zelda's house? Why did they intimidate her like that?" Ty scratched his bearded chin, thoughtful. "Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all." Janine returned with nappies, powdered milk, and baby bottles. As they prepared the bottles for the hungry babies, she shared something she had overheard at the chemist. "People are talking about the accident. They say it was very strange. The Montgomery's driver was experienced, had never been involved in any accident in 20 years of service, and the car was new with all those modern security systems." "Do you think it wasn't an accident?" Ty asked, lowering his voice instinctively. "I don't know. But I heard one of the assistants commenting that the grandfather, Augustus Montgomery, was arguing with his son over the management of the companies. It seems the old man wanted to return to command, but the son wouldn't let him." Rachel remained silent, feeding Raphael with the bottle. A theory began to form in her head, a theory too terrifying to be verbalized. "We need to contact their father," she finally said, "but directly, without intermediaries. I don't trust anyone else." "And how are we going to do that?" Janine questioned. "We can't just show up at his mansion with 3 babies in our arms. The security guards wouldn't even let us get close." "We need a plan," Ty agreed. "And in the meantime, we have to keep these little ones safe." That night, the 4 adults took turns caring for the babies. Despite the precarious circumstances, the triplets seemed calm, as if they felt protected. Rachel couldn't sleep. Every noise startled her. Every shadow seemed a danger. Who were those men? How had they found out about Mrs. Zelda? And most importantly, who was really behind the baby's disappearance? The next morning, Ty left early to check the situation outside. He returned carrying newspapers and with a grave expression. "The reward has gone up to £10 million, he announced, showing the headline. "And there's something else. The police arrested a suspect last night. A man who claimed to have information about the babies." "Who?" Janine asked. "They don't say the name, only that he worked for the Montgomery family and was trying to extort the businessman." Rachel picked up the newspaper and studied the photo of Bernard Montgomery. The man looked devastated, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a lost gaze. It wasn't the look of someone involved in a conspiracy, she thought. It was the look of a desperate father. "I need to find him," Rachel decided. "He needs to know his children are safe." "It's too risky," Janine warned. "If there really is someone powerful behind all this, you'll be putting yourself and us in danger." "So what do you suggest? That we stay hidden forever? These babies need medical care, a proper home, and if they really are trying to harm them, only their father has the resources to truly protect them." The silence that followed was her answer. Everyone knew she was right, but the fear was palpable. "I'll help you," Ty finally said. "I know someone who works cleaning at that hospital where the baby's mother is admitted. Maybe we can send a message through her." A plan began to form, but none of them had any idea of the dangers that were still to come. Night fell over London as Rachel, her heart pounding, entered St. Thomas's Hospital, disguised in a cleaning assistant's uniform that Ty had managed to get. The plan was simple, though risky. Locate Bernard Montgomery, who would likely be visiting his comatose wife, and give him a photograph of the babies with a message written on the back. Ty's friend, Marlene, who worked cleaning the hospital, guided Rachel through the aseptic corridors. "The ICU is on the 4th floor," Marlene whispered. "The businessman's wife is in room 412. He usually arrives around 8 and stays until 10. It was almost 8:30. Rachel adjusted her uniform cap to better hide her face and headed towards the lifts. In the canvas bag she carried, the instant photograph Janine had taken of the babies seemed to burn, constantly reminding her of the weight of her mission. On the fourth floor, Rachel walked slowly down the corridor, pushing an empty cleaning trolley. Security was tight, but the uniform and her young, harmless appearance helped avoid raising suspicion. As she approached room 412, she saw two men in suits standing outside. Security guards, she presumed. Her stomach sank. How would she get past them? At that moment, one of the guards received a call and stepped away to answer it. The other remained alert, but was distractedly looking at his phone. It was her chance. Rachel approached, pretending to clean the floor near the door. Through a crack, she could see inside the room. A beautiful, pale woman, connected to various machines, lay motionless in the bed. Beside her, holding her hand, was Bernard Montgomery. The girl felt a shiver run down her spine. It was now or never. Gathering courage, she left the trolley and tried to enter the room. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" The guard immediately blocked her path. I need to change the bin," Rachel stammered, trying to sound natural. "It was changed half an hour ago," the man replied, suspicious. "Who are you?" "I've never seen you around here before." Panic grew inside her. Everything was going wrong. On an impulse, Rachel turned and ran down the corridor, ignoring the guard's shouts. She turned left, then right, desperately looking for the emergency exit. Behind her, she could hear voices and footsteps approaching. She entered a small supply closet and hid behind stacked boxes, trying to control her ragged breathing. Minutes later, when the sound of footsteps faded, Rachel cautiously emerged from her hiding place. She needed to get out of there before hospital security initiated a systematic search. She was about to open the door when she heard voices approaching. "I don't understand why they don't just ask for the ransom," said a male voice. "Maybe it's not about money," another voice replied. "I heard that old Augustus is behind this. The grandfather. Why would he do that to his own grandchildren? You know how he is. Ever since Bernard took full control of the companies," the voices faded. But Rachel remained motionless, her blood cold in her veins. It was the confirmation she feared. The baby's grandfather was involved in their disappearance. Why, what could be the motive for such cruelty? When she finally managed to leave the hospital through a service door, Rachel ran non-stop until she was several blocks away. Only then did she allow herself to slow down, breathless and with tears of frustration in her eyes. She had failed in her mission, and now the hospital security guards had probably seen her. Returning to the hideout, she found a scene of panic. Janine was rocking the babies, visibly nervous, while Ty stood guard near the entrance. "What happened?" Rachel asked, alarmed. "Two men were here," Janine replied, her voice trembling, "asking about children to the homeless people in the area, offering money for information." "How did they find us?" Rachel murmured, terrified. "We don't know if they found us," Ty pondered. "They might just be searching areas where homeless people usually shelter. But we can't risk it. We need to get out of here now." In minutes they gathered the little they had. Rachel improvised a sling again with a sheet to carry the babies, while Ty and Janine carried the few provisions they had managed to get. "Where are we going?" Janine asked, looking anxiously at the stairs leading to the street. Ty scratched his chin, thoughtful. "I know a place. In the abandoned tunnels of the old underground expansion project. It's damp and dark, but no one will look for us there." Moving through the shadows of the London night, the small group followed alleys and back streets until they reached a rusty grate that gave access to an underground tunnel. Ty removed it with effort, and one by one they entered the darkness. The tunnel was cold and damp, smelling of mold and abandonment. Ty lit a makeshift torch, revealing a long concrete corridor that seemed to stretch indefinitely. "Stay close," he warned. "It's easy to get lost down here." They walked for about 15 minutes until they reached a small side chamber where the ceiling was a little higher and the floor less damp. Janine spread out a blanket, and Rachel placed the babies on it. Miraculously, they had slept through the entire journey. "I think we'll be safe here for now," Ty said, sitting heavily on the concrete floor. "No one has come to these tunnels for years. They were abandoned after the project was cancelled due to lack of funds." Rachel looked around, feeling a mixture of gratitude and despair. They were safe, yes, but for how long could they live like this? The babies needed sunlight, fresh air, medical care. This couldn't be a permanent solution. "I'll try again tomorrow," she declared, determined. "I'll find a way to talk to Bernard Montgomery." "It's too risky," Janine protested. "After what happened today, security around him must be doubled. We have no choice. We can't stay hidden forever. And these babies need to go back to their father, especially now that we know their own grandfather might be trying to... Rachel couldn't complete the sentence. The idea was too terrible. Ty, who had been thoughtful, finally spoke. What if, instead of us going to him, we make him come to us? How? Rachel asked, confused. The reward. £10 million for information about the babies. We can use that. But how will we make contact without revealing our location? Janine questioned. As soon as we say we have the babies, they'll trace the call and find us. And we don't know who will answer. It could be someone working for the grandfather. You're right, Ty agreed. We need a reliable intermediary. Someone who can verify that we are actually talking to the father and not the grandfather's henchman. Silence fell over the group as each got lost in their own thoughts. The only sounds were the soft breathing of the sleeping babies and the distant dripping of water in the tunnel. It was Rachel who finally broke the silence. The press, she simply said. We can contact a journalist, someone who wants an exclusive story. It's risky, Ty pondered. Journalists want to sell news, not necessarily do what's right. We need to choose the right one, Rachel insisted. Someone known for investigative reporting with integrity. Janine nodded slowly. I know one. Clarissa Allen from The Guardian. She did a series of reports on homeless children a few years ago. She interviewed me at the time. She seemed to genuinely care. A plan began to form. They would use a public telephone to contact the journalist, arrange a meeting in a busy public place, show proof that they had the babies, and ask her to mediate a meeting with Bernard Montgomery. It was risky, but it seemed to be the best option available. They agreed on the details and decided that Janine, being an adult and less recognizable than Rachel at that moment, would make the initial contact with the journalist. While the others slept, Rachel remained awake, watching over the babies. Michael and Gabriel slept peacefully, but Raphael seemed restless. She picked him up, gently rocking him. It's going to be all right, she whispered to the little one. I'm going to take you back to your father. I promise. Raphael looked at her with dark eyes that seemed much wiser than his few months of life would allow. For a moment, Rachel felt a pang of sadness. In just a few days, she had grown deeply attached to these babies. The idea of separating from them was painful, even though she knew it was the right thing to do. A sudden noise startled her. It seemed distant but unmistakable, footsteps echoing through the tunnel. Someone was coming. Ty, she whispered urgently, shaking the sleeping man. Someone's in the tunnel. In seconds, everyone was awake and alert. Ty extinguished the small light they kept on and gestured for them to remain in absolute silence. The footsteps drew closer, now accompanied by the beam of a torch dancing on the tunnel walls. It wasn't just one person. There were several, judging by the different rhythms of footsteps. How did they know? Janine murmured almost inaudibly. There was no time for questions. They were cornered with no escape route. The main tunnel was the only way in and out of that chamber. Rachel clutched the babies to herself, determined to protect them to the end. Whoever was coming would not take the triplets without going through her first. The footsteps approached inexorably. Rachel held the babies against her chest, while Ty positioned himself protectively in front of the group, wielding a rusty pipe he had found on the tunnel floor. Stay behind me, he whispered. The torchlight illuminated the entrance to the chamber where they were hidden, creating elongated, ghostly shadows on the damp walls. The babies, sensing the tension, began to whimper softly. I heard that, said a male voice. There are children here. More footsteps, more lights. Suddenly, 3 men appeared at the entrance to the chamber. Their silhouettes cut against the darkness of the tunnel. 2 of them wore dark suits. Rachel recognized with horror the same men who had intimidated Mrs. Zelda. The third wore more casual clothes, but had the same authoritarian posture. Well, look what we have here, said the man in casual clothes, cracking a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. The little heroine and her protégé. You've given us quite a bit of trouble, you know. Who are you? Ty asked, still in a defensive posture. What do you want? That's none of your business, old man, one of the suited men replied dryly, stepping forward. We're here for the babies. Hand them over peacefully and no one gets hurt. They are Bernard Montgomery's children, Rachel said, trying to buy time. Do you work for him? The man in casual clothes laughed, a humorless sound that echoed off the tunnel walls. Let's just say we represent the interests of the Montgomery family. Now be reasonable. You can't properly care for these children down here. They need doctors, comfort. Why didn't you call the police then? Janine challenged, stepping forward. Why this stealthy approach? If you really cared about these children's well-being, you'd have authorities with you. The question seemed to irritate the men. The tallest of the three pulled something from his pocket, a small black device that Rachel recognized with horror as a stun gun. Enough talk, he declared. We're taking the babies now, one way or another. Ty lunged forward with the pipe, but was quickly subdued by one of the men. Janine screamed and tried to help him, only to be violently pushed against the wall. Rachel, seeing her friends fallen, felt a mixture of terror and fury grow within her. She retreated to the back of the chamber, protecting the babies with her body, while her mind frantically searched for an exit. That's when she noticed, almost imperceptible in the gloom, a small opening in the wall behind her, partially covered by rubble. It seemed to be the entrance to a ventilation shaft or perhaps a maintenance tunnel. Would it be big enough for her and the babies? There was no time to hesitate. With a swift movement, Rachel pushed aside the rubble and confirmed that the opening, though tight, was passable. Quickly, she tied the babies to her body with the improvised sheet like a backpack, so they would be secure on her back. Ty. Janine, she screamed, trying to distract the attackers as she prepared to escape. Run! Her friends, understanding the plan, rose unsteadily and lunged at the men, creating the necessary distraction. Amidst the confusion, Rachel squeezed through the opening, crawling through the narrow tunnel with the babies tied to her back. The tunnel was suffocating, covered in dust and cobwebs. Rachel could hear muffled shouts behind her and the sound of people trying to follow the same path. The babies cried, frightened by the sudden movement and the darkness. It's all right, she whispered repeatedly, more to reassure herself than the little ones. We'll make it. We'll be okay. After what seemed like an eternity crawling in the darkness, the tunnel began to ascend. Rachel felt a current of fresh air. They were approaching an exit. With renewed vigor, she pushed herself forward until she emerged into an old abandoned underground station. She barely had time to orient herself. Sounds of footsteps echoed through the tunnel behind her. The men were approaching. Rachel ran to the stairs leading to the surface, only to find them blocked by rusty grates. Desperate, she looked around and saw a maintenance ladder on the side wall. With superhuman effort, she began to climb one rung at a time with the babies weighing on her back. Her arms burned, her legs trembled, but fear gave her strength she didn't even know she possessed. She reached the top of the ladder and found a semi-open service door. She pushed it open and stepped out into the night air. She was in a vacant lot surrounded by construction hoardings. In the distance, the lights of a busy avenue shone like a beacon of hope. Rachel ran towards the lights, her bare feet hurting on the stones and debris. Upon reaching the avenue, she saw she was on the M4 motorway, near a large construction site. Cars sped past, indifferent to her desperate situation. That's when she saw it, on the other side of the avenue, a police car parked next to a patrol vehicle. Her heart leaped. Could she trust them? She wasn't sure, but her options were running out. Before she could decide, she heard shouts behind her. The men had emerged from the vacant lot and spotted her. Rachel ran to the construction site, looking for a place to hide. The site was a labyrinth of machines, construction materials, and partially erected structures. Rachel squeezed between steel beams and piles of bricks, trying not to make noise so as not to wake the babies who, miraculously, had fallen asleep, exhausted by the stress. A huge crane stood in the center of the site. In her desperation, Rachel began to climb the metal structure, hoping that the height and darkness would hide her from her pursuers. She reached a platform about 10 meters from the ground and crouched, trying to catch her breath. From there, she could see the entire construction site, including the men who were chasing her now, spreading out to look for her. But then something unexpected happened. Police cars entered the site, sirens silent but lights flashing. Uniformed men quickly descended, weapons drawn. Among them, Rachel recognized a figure, Bernard Montgomery, the baby's father. How had he found her? Had Ty or Janine managed to alert him? Or perhaps someone was watching the men who were chasing her. Rachel! A familiar voice shouted. It was Ty. He was alive, apparently unharmed, talking to one of the police officers and pointing towards the crane. Powerful lights illuminated the metal structure, revealing her position. Rachel trembled, torn between relief and fear. Was it really a rescue or a more elaborate trap? "Girl!" a voice amplified by a megaphone called. "We know you have the babies. Please come down carefully. We are here to help." Rachel hesitated, clinging to the crane's structure. That's when she saw new movement. A black luxury car abruptly parked near the patrol vehicles. An elderly man with grey hair and an impeccable suit quickly got out. Even from a distance, the resemblance to Bernard was unmistakable. It was Augustus Alistair, the baby's grandfather. Rachel's heart raced. The grandfather's presence confirmed her most terrible suspicions. He was there to finish what he had started with the accident, eliminate his grandchildren and now the witnesses. "Don't trust him," Rachel shouted with all the strength of her lungs, pointing at the older man. "He's the one who ordered them kidnapped." Her voice echoed across the construction site, causing a moment of confusion among those present. Bernard turned to his father, an expression of disbelief and horror on his face. "What is she talking about, father?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Augustus maintained his composure, but his eyes flashed dangerously. "Don't listen to that street girl, son. She's obviously disturbed. She probably kidnapped your children herself to demand a ransom." "Lies!" Rachel shouted again. "I heard his men talking. He wanted to get rid of the babies to control the company." One of the police officers cautiously approached Bernard. "Sir, our men found something in the security footage from the day of the accident. The car was sabotaged, and we've identified 2 of the suspects as employees of security companies contracted by your father." Shock washed over Bernard's face like a wave. He turned to confront his father, but Augustus had already taken a step back, his face a mask of cold calculation. "You don't understand, Bernard," he said, his voice now harsher. "The empire I built was being destroyed by your modernist ideas. You are dismantling decades of hard work with your environmental and social responsibility policies. The BAM group always prospered by doing what was necessary, not caring for sentimentality." Rachel watched the scene unfold below her, astonished. The grandfather was confessing his plan in front of everyone. "So it was all true?" Bernard asked, his voice choked with emotion. "Teresa's accident, my children's disappearance. Was it all orchestrated by you?" "My own father?" Augustus raised his chin, defiant. "You left me no choice. When I learned of the clause in your will leaving everything to the babies, with Teresa as curator if anything happened to you, I realized I needed to act. If the triplets disappeared before their first birthday, the fortune would revert to me, as stipulated by the group's original founding agreement." A horrified murmur ran through those present. Rachel could barely believe what she was hearing. "And for that you nearly killed my wife? Plan to eliminate your own grandchildren?" Bernard's voice trembled with fury and disbelief. "Business is business," Augustus replied coldly. "I didn't expect you to understand. You've always been too weak." At that moment, something seemed to break in Bernard. With a roar of pain and rage, he lunged at his father, only to be restrained by 2 police officers. "Augustus Alistair Montgomery," declared the detective inspector leading the operation, "you are under arrest for planning the attack against Teresa Montgomery and for the kidnapping of 3 minors. You have the right to remain silent." As the police officers handcuffed Augustus, Bernard looked up at Rachel, still clinging to the crane's structure. His eyes, though filled with tears, conveyed a clear message, gratitude and plea. "Please," he called, extending his arms, "bring my children back to me." Rachel hesitated for a moment. The babies still slept peacefully tied to her back, oblivious to the drama unfolding because of them. She had grown deeply attached to them in these few weeks. Giving them up would be like losing a part of herself. But she knew what was right. Slowly, she began to descend from the crane. A police officer climbed up to help her, carefully guiding her to the ground. When she finally stepped onto the ground, Rachel untied the sheet and, with silent tears streaming down her face, handed the triplets to Bernard Montgomery. "Michael, Raphael and Gabriel," she said softly, pointing to each of them, according to the colorful ribbons on their wrists. "These are the names I gave them." Bernard took his children into his arms, sobbing with relief and joy. For a moment, the world around them seemed to disappear. It was just a father and his children, reunited after weeks of separation and danger. When he finally looked up at Rachel, Bernard's gaze was filled with a gratitude that words could not express. "You saved my children," he he said, his voice choked. "How can I ever repay you?" Rachel had no answer. She hadn't done it expecting a reward. She did what anyone with a heart would do. She protected 3 helpless children from danger. Just then, a faint voice caught everyone's attention. "Bernard?" Turning, they saw a woman being helped out of an ambulance parked nearby. It was Teresa Montgomery, pale and visibly weak but conscious. "Teresa!" Bernard exclaimed, quickly approaching with the babies in his arms. "You're awake." "How?" "I woke up last night," she explained, smiling faintly as she touched her children's little faces. "The doctors told me everything. I couldn't stay out of it once I knew our babies had been located." Her gaze fell upon Rachel, small and disheveled, standing a few meters away. "Is that her? The girl who saved our children?" Bernard nodded, gesturing for Rachel to approach. Timidly, the girl took a few steps towards the couple. "What's your name, dear?" Teresa asked, extending her hand. "Rachel," she replied, almost whispering. Teresa took her hand gently. "Rachel, you did something we can never adequately repay. You protected our children with your own life without even knowing us." Something in the way Teresa looked at her, with genuine gratitude and affection, made Rachel's heart clench. It was the look she had always imagined her own mother would have for her if she were still alive. "What's going to happen now?" Rachel asked, looking uncertainly at the babies in Bernard's arms. "With the men who were chasing us? With their grandfather?" "Justice," Bernard replied firmly. "Augustus and his accomplices will face the consequences of their actions. And as for you," he exchanged a meaningful look with Teresa, who nodded slightly. "Well, that depends on you. What do you mean?" "Rachel," Teresa began, her voice soft and sincere, "we would like to invite you to become a part of our family, not just as someone who saved our children, but as someone who belongs with us. If you wish, of course." Rachel blinked, stunned, unsure if she had understood correctly. "You mean live with you?" "We mean to adopt you," Bernard clarified. "Legally, if that's what you wish. Our children wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. And from what we've seen, you love them as much as we do." Rachel looked at the babies, at their small sleeping faces, then at Ty and Janine, who watched the scene with emotional smiles, finally at Teresa and Bernard, who looked at her with expectation, and love asking words wouldn't come, only tears, but this time they were tears of joy. Rachel nodded, unable to speak, and felt Teresa's arms wrap around her in a maternal embrace. At that moment, under the lights of the construction site, amidst police officers, curious workers, and journalists who were starting to arrive, a new family was born. Not by blood, but by the love and courage they had shown for one another in the most adverse circumstances. 6 months later, the Montgomery mansion in Hampstead had been transformed. What was once an austere and formal environment was now full of life and children's laughter. The gardens, once maintained with almost military precision, now housed a small playground and colorful flower beds that Rachel had helped plant. In the spacious living room, Teresa smiled as she watched Rachel, now with well-groomed hair and wearing a simple but elegant dress, playing on the rug with the triplets, who had just turned 9 months old. "Look how Gabriel is already almost crawling," Rachel commented enthusiastically, as the baby pushed himself forward on his chubby little arms, trying to propel himself. "He was always the most adventurous." Teresa approached and sat on the rug beside the girl. "You know them better than anyone," she said with affection, adjusting the green ribbon on Raphael's wrist, which was now more of a tradition than a necessity for identifying them. "Sometimes I think you can even read their thoughts." Rachel smiled a little shyly. Even after months of living with the Montgomerys, she still had moments when she could barely believe her new reality. The transition from a street girl to the adopted daughter of one of London's most influential families hadn't been easy, but Teresa and Bernard did everything to make her feel loved and safe. The adoption process had been accelerated thanks to the family's influence, but also due to the extraordinary circumstances of the case. The story of the 7-year-old girl who saved the Montgomery heirs captured the public's imagination, with newspapers and magazines clamoring for a happy ending for the little heroine. The doorbell rang, announcing visitors. Teresa rose to receive them, while Rachel continued to entertain the babies. Seconds later, familiar voices filled the room. "Where's our little warrior?" Ty asked, entering the room with a wide smile, followed by Janine and Mrs. Zelda. After the events at the construction site, Bernard had insisted on helping the friends who protected his children. Ty now worked as a supervisor in the Montgomery Foundation's social project, which offered housing and professional training for homeless people. Janine was completing her social work studies, financed by the same foundation, while Mrs. Zelda had moved into a comfortable house near the mansion, where she often helped care for the children. "Ty!" Rachel exclaimed, running to hug him. The babies cooed happily, recognizing the frequent visitors. As the group settled in the living room, Bernard joined them, bringing a tray with refreshments. His countenance was lighter than in previous months, though he still bore the marks of the trauma and betrayal he had faced. "I have news," he announced, sitting beside Teresa. "Augustus's trial has been set for next month. The prosecution has a solid case, especially with the recording Teresa managed to make." A momentary silence fell over the group. Teresa had revealed after awakening from her coma that she had suspected her father-in-law's intentions for months. On the morning of the accident, she had secretly managed to record a conversation in which Augustus spoke about removing obstacles and regaining control before the heir's birthday. The recording, although not explicit about an attack, corroborated with other evidence found later. "And the men who chased us?" Janine asked. "Two of them made plea bargains," Bernard replied. "They are providing details about the entire scheme. The third, the one closest to my father, continues to deny involvement, but the evidence against him is overwhelming." Rachel, who was distractedly playing with the yellow ribbon on Michael's wrist, looked up. "They won't come back, will they? Are we really safe now?" The question, asked with the characteristic frankness of a child, touched the hearts of everyone present. Teresa enveloped Rachel in a protective hug. "Yes, dear, we are safe now. Augustus can no longer harm us, and his accomplices are all in custody or being monitored." What Teresa didn't mention were the additional security measures implemented at the mansion, nor the discreet team of bodyguards who accompanied family members whenever they went out. Some precautions were still necessary, at least until all ramifications of Augustus's conspiracy were completely dismantled. "I have another piece of news too," Bernard continued, trying to lighten the mood. "The restructuring of the BAM group is almost complete. We are finalizing the creation of the Rachel Institute, which will coordinate all our social projects aimed at children in vulnerable situations." Rachel's eyes widened. With my name?" Bernard smiled, stroking the girl's hair. "Of course. It was you who taught us about courage and compassion, Rachel. We want this legacy to continue helping other children who are in the situation you were in." The girl lowered her gaze, too emotional to respond. Teresa gently took her hand. "We know your adaptation to school and your new life hasn't been easy," she said softly. "The other children sometimes don't understand your story, ask inconvenient questions, or are cruel." It was true. Despite the affection of her new family, Rachel's integration into the private school where she had been enrolled had been challenging. Some children, influenced by media sensationalism or their own family's prejudices, treated her as an intruder, or worse, as a curiosity. The street girl who became a princess, as a gossip magazine had cruelly emblazoned on its cover. "But we're proud of how you've handled all this," Bernard added. "Your strength and dignity inspire us all." "And remember, you're not alone." Rachel nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "I know I'm not alone. I have you now. And I have the babies." As if understanding they were being mentioned, the triplets simultaneously began to make joyful noises, eliciting laughter from everyone in the room. The afternoon passed peacefully, with light conversations and plans for the future. Mrs. Zelda had brought her famous chocolate truffles, which Rachel devoured with childhood enthusiasm, while Ty entertained everyone with stories of his new job, where he helped people in situations similar to his own. When the visitors said goodbye in the early evening, Rachel helped Teresa bathe the babies, a routine that had become a special moment of connection between them. "Do you think they'll remember?" Rachel asked as she delicately dried Gabriel. "The time we spent hiding when I took care of them." Teresa considered the question, applying cream to Raphael's little body. Consciously, probably not. They were too young. "But I think in some way, there will always be a special connection between you. You were the first person to truly protect and love them in a moment of danger. That creates a bond that goes beyond memory. Rachel nodded, satisfied with the answer. Often, Teresa knew exactly what to say to calm her worries. After the babies were put to sleep, Rachel prepared for her own bedtime. Her room, decorated in soft shades of green and yellow, her favorite colors, was a world apart from the dark alleys where she used to shelter. A soft bed, shelves full of books, her own space to study and play, luxuries that once seemed unimaginable. Sitting on her bed, Rachel leafed through a photo album that Teresa had started to put together. The first pages contained newspaper clippings about the Montgomery case, as the press had called it. Headlines about the accident, the baby's disappearance, Augustus's arrest. But quickly the news gave way to happy moments. Rachel with the babies in the garden. The family gathered at the triplets' 6-month party. Rachel on her first day at her new school. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Bernard. "May I come in?" he asked, waiting at the threshold. Rachel nodded, closing the album. Bernard sat on the edge of the bed, his gaze falling on the photo album. "Revisiting memories?" he asked with a smile. "Yes, it's strange to see all this in photos. It feels like so long ago, but it also feels like yesterday." Bernard nodded, understanding. "I know what you mean. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night and have to go to the boys' room just to make sure they're really there, safe." "I do that sometimes too," Rachel confessed. "It's silly, isn't it?" "No, it's not silly at all. It's love." Bernard paused, as if carefully choosing his next words. "Rachel, I came here because I wanted to be sure that you are truly happy with us. I know your life has changed completely, and sometimes I worry if we're doing enough to make you feel at home." The question caught Rachel by surprise. For a moment, she reflected on everything that had happened in recent months. The changes, the challenges, the moments of doubt, but also the growing sense of belonging. "I am happy," she finally replied, with the sincerity only a child possesses. "Sometimes I miss old Benedict from the park, and some people I met on the streets, but you've never stopped me from visiting them, and I like having a real family. Being able to take care of the babies without having to worry if they'll be cold or hungry." Bernard smiled, visibly relieved. "You know you'll always be welcome to visit your friends. In fact, I'm thinking of inviting old Benedict to work in the mansion's gardens if he's interested. What do you think?" Rachel's face lit up. "That would be amazing. He knows all the plants in the park, you know. He taught me the names of several flowers." "Then it's decided. I'll speak with him next week." Bernard made to stand up, but Rachel stopped him with a question she had held for a long time. "Bernard, I mean Dad," she was still getting used to using that word, "do you think the baby's grandfather will really spend the rest of his life in prison? What if he gets out? What if he still wants to harm you?" The genuine concern in the girl's voice moved Bernard. He sat down again, gently holding her small hands. "Augustus did terrible things, Rachel. He betrayed the family's trust and endangered the people he should have loved and protected. Yes, he will likely spend many years in prison. But even if he is released one day, he will no longer have the power to harm us, I promise." "How can you be sure?" "Feokinda, because we are no longer alone. We have each other, and together we are stronger than any threat." Rachel considered the words for a moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer. Bernard leaned in to kiss her forehead. "Time for bed now. Tomorrow will be a big day." "Why?" Rachel asked, settling under the covers. "Surprise," he replied with an enigmatic smile, turning off the bedside lamp. "Good night, daughter." "Good night, Dad." When the door closed, Rachel lay looking at the ceiling where small adhesive stars glowed in the dark. It was an artificial sky, but beautiful nonetheless. It reminded her of the nights she slept outdoors, counting real stars to ward off fear. Now, in her warm and safe bed with a family who loved her, Rachel no longer needed the stars to feel protected. But she still liked to look at them, remembering the journey she had traveled. The next morning, Rachel discovered what the surprise was. The entire family traveled to the Cornish coast, where they would spend a weekend at the Montgomery's beach house in St. Ives. It was Rachel's first time seeing the ocean. Standing on the sand, with the waves lapping at her bare feet and the sea breeze ruffling her hair, she watched Teresa and Bernard sitting on a towel spread on the sand. The babies playing protected under a parasol. Michael, Raphael and Gabriel, almost completing their first year of life, grew strong and healthy, oblivious to the drama that had marked their first months. The sun shone intensely in the blue, cloudless sky. A new day, a new beginning. Rachel breathed deeply the salty air, feeling a peace she had never experienced before. From an invisible girl on the streets of London to a beloved daughter and sister, her journey had been extraordinary. And as she ran back to join her family on the Towel, Rachel knew that no matter what challenges the future brought, they would face them together. With love, courage, and the strength that only those who have known true adversity can possess. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Rachel and the triplets has deeply touched your hearts. To continue following emotional journeys like this one, we have prepared a special playlist with equally captivating narratives that explore family bonds, overcoming adversity, and the transformative power of love. You can find it by clicking the link on your left. If this story stirred emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexity of life and the beauty of human connections. And don't forget to share in the comments which moment of Rachel's journey touched your heart the most. Your opinion is very important to us,